Hey you're listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane, but I'm your host, Vinyl Man Jeb, here to tell you about RoboJack Records. Now, RoboJack Records is the record label destination for Jeb's music, Jim Terrell, and the Sane Riot so far. To come, robojackrecords.com, where you could plug in.
You're listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hey, what is up, and welcome to a brand new Straight to Video podcast. Today I speak to Ryan Smith, guitarist for the legendary band Soul Asylum, who is also releasing some amazing solo material right now, and has been on a great musical journey with the band the Melismatics and his project Ryan and Pony, all of which I urge you to check out after our chat. Ryan has been the lead guitarist for Soul Asylum since 2016 and worked on their most recent album Hurry Up and Wait, and the band are steadily getting back to regular touring, and I'm still very much keeping my fingers crossed for some long overdue UK shows in the near future, because that really needs to happen soon. We chat all about this and all of Ryan's projects, including how he landed the Soul Asylum gig, and also how the really rich music history and influence his home state of Minnesota has had on his career. It's a great chat, which I'm sure you're gonna enjoy. Before we dive in, regular listeners will know I'm going to send some love and support to my friends Dead Skull Coffee. Now is the time to get yourself some of their amazing ground or full bean rock and roll coffee. Get in there early, as things are really blowing up for these guys, and rightly so. You will find them at music festivals throughout the summer, and they're regularly updating their range of products, so head on over to deadskullcoffee.co.uk, and if you add the discount code STV on checkout, you will bag yourself 15% off your order. After my chat with Ryan Smith of Soul Asylum, please be sure to keep up to date on all future releases and shows at soulasylum.com, and you can find Ryan's great new solo material wherever you stream your music, but please show your support for his artist page on Facebook by just searching Ryan Smith Solo Artist and let him know you heard about him on this podcast. But for now, sit back and enjoy my straight to video chat with guitarist and songwriter Ryan Smith.
I held a grip so tight, never let go without a fight, clinging to such high ideals, but now I know how descending feels. Feels like I'm tripping. Too much time inside my...
What's going on, sir?
How are you doing?
I'm good, Ryan. Thanks ever so much for doing this for us. I appreciate you checking in and getting to hook up. It's awesome. So whereabouts are you? You actually in Minnesota now?
Yeah, I'm in Minnesota. Yeah, St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Rob, where are you exactly again?
I always say like the nearest big city is Nottingham.
Okay.
Point of reference for everybody.
All
so
right.
what is it? It's about 120 miles north of London. So I'm kind of right bang in the middle of the UK.
Nice.
Have you been over here before?
I've been to Ireland, but I've never been in England. Not yet, at least. Soul Asylum is supposed to be going over for like a tour. It's been prolonged for the last like 5, actually, even before the pandemic, it had gotten prolonged. But then, you know, once that happened, we had rescheduled like 3 times. Finally, we were just like, we don't need to reschedule this again.
Yeah, let's just can it and wait for it to come around again.
They're talking about doing it again, but, you know, details on that, who knows, like when that's actually going to happen. But we'll see. Fingers crossed. Hopefully it'll be in the next year.
I'd love to learn about your journey through the Minnesota music scene. I mean, it's got such a rich history itself, particularly with some of the bands that broke in the 90s. Obviously Soul Asylum, but also you had bands such as Semisonic, I believe, and the Jayhawks, all from that kind of area. Was this all during a time when you yourself was like becoming fully submerged into guitar bands?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, right out of the gate, the band Husker Du was one of my favorite bands. And there was a family connection with that band. And I had heard about them since I was like super little. And also growing up in the Twin Cities, it's just in the water. Bands like The Replacements, Husker Du, Soul Asylum, Prince, because it is a very diverse music scene here. And then there's like other R&B groups like Mint Condition. Obviously, we had Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, the massive producers who worked with The Time and Janet Jackson and all kinds of just amazing things. It was pretty inescapable. So when I started becoming interested in music, it was a great place to be. There's so many influences everywhere you go. When I was in high school, I remember going to an event where it was like all the Twin Cities schools for students that were interested in careers in music. We had Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis as guest speakers and some just phenomenal musicians. I mean, it was such what an amazing place to be from.
Yeah, definitely. You mention Husker Du, they've been around for years. Obviously, Bob Mould, and was you a fan of the Sugar album, which you did?
Oh, yeah. Totally love Sugar. And I know it's a little polarizing for certain fans of Husker Du, but I loved I think they made 2 full-length records, right? Because there was Copper Blue was the debut full-length, Beaster was an EP, and then I know there's a live record, and then there was File Under Easy Listening, and then B-sides. So, I mean, I liked all of it. I loved Copper Blue. Beaster was really, really crazy cool. It was like all the same production that was going into Copper Blue, but it had the more raw energy with some of those songs. I mean, it was a little more intense.
Me and my wife have got like polar opposite musical tastes. I like all the big hair 80s hard rock bands, and she's more into like indie stuff and all that kind of thing. And she played me the Copper Blue album. I was like, holy shit, what is this? This is like one of those bands which we do agree on, where it's just like these massive hooks and big guitars. It's great.
Yeah.
So good. But you've been into music like from a really young age, though, after being, I think, exposed to your dad's record collection and discovering the Beatles when you were like 5 years old. I don't know at that age, you was perhaps too young to know, but did that seem like old music, or was there just some magic that blew you away with it?
It seemed like magic that blew me away, and I actually felt like I discovered something no one else knew about, which is hilarious. I remember going to a summer camp and asking somebody, it was one of the counselors at the camp, I said, have you heard of the Beatles? Because I thought I'd discovered this rare underground band in my dad's record collection, because I had no idea. And I just remember she just looked at me kind of like, yeah, I've heard of the Beatles. And then I kind of realized at that point, wow, maybe this band is something that more people know about. And then, of course, learned they were the biggest band in the history of rock and roll music.
What album or songs was it that attracted you? Do you remember?
Well, the first record I discovered of the Beatles in my dad's collection was Rubber Soul. It was the American version of it, right? Which you're probably familiar. There's the UK version or the British version that had different songs. So I fell in love with that original version, which is not even the right album, which I found later. I love both of them. I love any version of it. And then after that, he had Revolver. Between those 2 albums, I was just completely hooked.
What an introduction. I mean, that's more like your more, not obscure Beatles. I don't think there's anything that's obscure Beatles, but more of the left field experimental Beatles for a lot of people. So you was going in like deep straight away.
Yeah. But that was the stuff that excited me, it was like, it just sounded weird. And, again, it's hard to say that now because the Beatles are so ubiquitous and everybody's heard it. It's like the weirdest of Beatles seems normal now. But, when you're a kid and you don't know who they are or anything about them, it seemed, well, really, really adventurous, and dark in a weird way.
I guess you could introduce them to your friends as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how well known they were. Like you say, you thought they were a band which no one else had heard of. And I guess for many years later, I mean, until you get really deep into music, I don't know how much it crosses over into popular culture. Everyone knows about them, but how much it gets into your friend group at that young age.
Yeah.
So you're like, go check this band out. And they're like, no, I'm listening to, I don't know what your friends were listening to at the time.
Yeah. There was another record too that he had, which was Hey Jude. It's a collection of singles. So it had Hey Jude, Revolution. I don't remember what else was on it off the top of my head, but really cool stuff on there.
Just some strange record company cash in.
Yep. It made a really good album. Turns out you can pretty much take any Beatles singles and put them together and they'll still be a really strong album.
What was this music in contrast to, which was all over MTV and the charts at the time?
This would have been, like that era of, it was kind of a weird era because I liked current music at that time too. I mean, Love and Rockets, some of the guys from Bauhaus, they were really popular at that time, believe it or not. And then there was like this weird mix of, in mainstream music, there was really bad stuff like boy bands, but then you also had weird house music that was Technotronic and Ya Kid K.
Is this all the time for like CNC Music Factory and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, totally. And it all tied together weirdly with both like the Manchester music scene, where a lot of the kind of dancier rave music was coming at. And then you had music from, the New York dance scene kind of coming all together. It was a weird time when you look back on it, and then there were just monstrously popular, Skid Row and who else? Like, what did everybody listen to back then? Guns N' Roses were humongous. I mean, they were huge they made it through the grunge for a while until whenever they kind of
disappeared off the radar for a while.
They kind of self-imploded. It never really became unfashionable to like Guns N' Roses, I guess. They had a little bit of punk in them and they had a lot of grit. And so they weren't too smooth, so they were not pretty boys, so they could have survived through pretty much anything if they could have stayed together. But all that was all super popular. A lot of kids at that age were, I was friends with a lot of skaters. And so skaters would listen to punk music and
anything goes.
But yeah, a lot of like Black Flag and the Descendants, stuff like that.
How long was it for you, like, kind of getting into music to wanting to play guitar? Was that something you thought would be cool even at a young age?
It was something at a very young age that I thought would be cool, although I had no idea how to do it. So my dad had a guitar and I used to like really obsessively think about it. I would look at it, pick it up and just try to like move a finger around and see what, and be like, oh, what could I do with this? And I had all kinds of delusions of grandeur of like, oh, maybe I could join the Beatles, stuff like that, not realizing that they weren't even a band and John was no longer with us and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, I dreamed of it. I didn't actually start playing it until 7th or 8th grade. And I really took to it at that point. I took a crash course at a local music shop. I'll never forget. I mean, I had this guitar teacher who was total metal dude, like super long hair. And he was just like, here, dudes, here's a guitar, good luck. We rented a really bad guitar. It was called actually now they're sought after. It was the Fender Squire Bullet. Really inexpensive guitar. They only made them for a limited time. So people are now wanting them again. But it was like very unplayable. The action was really high and it was hard to do anything, and I was learning anyway, so it would have been hard. But I really dove in head first. So I started doing gigs I think my first gig was 2 weeks after really playing guitar.
That's like the bass player joke. Had my first lesson, had my second lesson, missed my third because I had a gig.
Yeah, it's the way it goes, I guess.
But wasn't you like doing, I think I heard you say you was doing like Metallica and Anthrax tunes.
Yeah, exactly. Anthrax, Metallica, there's probably Pantera. It's like some of the stuff, like now, obviously, with 2 weeks of experience, I was very limited on the arrangements of these songs that I could play. Like stuff that was involving one finger with drop D or power chords, I was doing that. But I do remember, because I was in a band with everybody else I think they were seniors in high school and I was in 7th grade. I just remember I went really crazy. Like, so I just played what I knew and then I just went totally nuts and people were like, whoa, what's wrong with that guy?
So no stage fright, first gig.
I think I probably had it. I think I channeled it into kind of acting crazy.
What was the name of the band? Do you remember?
Vertigo 3.
You were way ahead of the numbers game then at that point.
Yeah.
When did you become aware of like the rich music scene actually in your home state? How did that affect you and your playing?
Oh, wow. I was aware of it very early on. Like some of my cousins would be at like a Husker Du rehearsal when they were kids. So I knew about it and I was aware of it. And I was a huge Prince fan from very early on. You couldn't not know that Prince was from your hometown because he was so massively popular. So I knew right away that there was a huge music scene there. And I actually really had a fascination with it and almost like an obsession with it. Some of my teachers in school that were younger at the time had been in the music scene and they had, become school teachers. So I remember specifically, we had a Spanish teacher who went to all kinds of Husker Du, Bob Mould, Soul Asylum shows, all of that.
You were picking the brain every lesson.
Oh yeah. And I mean, he was at the house parties at, and there was this place like in Minneapolis, they called it the Church. I think it was actually an old church where bands like recorded and did all kinds of shows. I think it was like an old, I don't know if it's abandoned. I don't know. I never actually went to it, but he had gone there. And I remember I'd always ask him to just tell me stories about the music scene because I just loved the idea of it so much.
Music just kind of engulfs you when you're young and just getting into it. So to have that outlet as well, to know that everything's on your doorstep as well, your brain must have been exploding, like waking up, first thing you think about.
Yeah, for sure.
But like I say, a lot of UK music appealed to you too, right? Like the Manchester bands in particular. How did that get on your radar?
Wow, that's a good question. I would guess that it had to do with a progression of, the first records I heard were British bands, the Beatles, the Kinks, the Stones. And then hearing bands like when maybe it even been like the Soup Dragons or something, where they were doing that kind of fusing the dance scene with the rave scene with the rock scene. So like I liked Joy Division a lot. I had like an obsessive period where Joy Division was all I listened to. And then, New Order, I probably like discovered them because of New Order was, obviously more mainstream and something you hear on the radio, and you maybe hear like Love Will Tear Us Apart. In the United States, at least, you didn't hear like a lot of Joy Division on the radio, at least not then. Now you do on certain stations.
I'm trying to think what bands broke on MTV over there, but there weren't many. The ones which kind of jumped to mind around that late 80s, early 90s time are like Jesus Jones and EMF, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Those were the hugely mainstream ones, at least in the US, that made you aware of that. But then you had the Happy Mondays and the Stone Roses.
Because they were huge over here, but I don't know how much it connected with America.
Right. Happy Mondays didn't have the same connection here, but if you were aware of that kind of music, you would know who they were. There were always the cooler, older, alternative kids that knew, what I mean? Like that I kind of looked up to, they were into the Smiths and they were into Morrissey solo, and they would know about all, the Happy Mondays, the Sundays. So I think it was that connection of having British music being at the core of what I had listened to and loved in music, and then hearing that exciting connection with what was becoming modern music. And I do think it's kind of funny. Like I was just thinking this, I don't know if you could corroborate this or shoot it down, but I kind of feel like this, if you were totally stereotypical, like American rockers, typically, if they hear like a dance beat, they say, turn that crap off. But in my mind, if it's British rockers, they hear the dance beat and they go, and they're like into it, take Oasis, like Oasis couldn't be more rock and roll, but they made that record where it was fusing it with EDM a little bit. And I mean, that's just like how it seems over there. Like Johnny Marr, he's like one of my favorite guitar players, and his music, it's that post-punk thing where you meet dance music. It's just a different...
Yeah, I don't know what that is. Whether it's to do with like the size of the country, everything's just constantly mingling. Like you guys are so spaced apart, everywhere has its little areas.
Yeah.
But over here, everything's constantly mixing in different scenes. It doesn't take much for it to blend into something else. I don't know if that's something to do with it or not. I've no idea.
Probably. It just seems like people are more, like, because I totally have that approach where like I hear something and I go, I don't have this strong reaction against it because it's different or something that I kind of embrace that, but I see it a lot. I see a lot with people I know and don't know, but interact with that they just hate, stuff like that. And it's kind of fun.
They want it pre-packaged and they want to know exactly what they're getting.
I guess. I don't know. Yeah, that's probably right.
Did you have like a local record store which had like an import section to find new bands, or did you read about bands in fanzines? Because obviously this is way before the internet.
Yeah. So record stores were such an important part of discovery of music and community. I mean, so the first record stores I think I went to were the large chains, just because that's like what, I don't know, it was the first most accessible thing. Because like if my mom was shopping for socks, there was Music Land or Sam Goody or those kind of like larger chains of record stores. And then we had and still have, some really amazing independent ones. But there used to be a local record store called Or Folk Jokopis, which I think it became Treehouse after that.
A little easier to digest.
Yeah. But that one was where the legendary record label Twin Tone Records was formed in that record store, which when I was in high school, I worked for Twin Tone Records, the record label. And they were at that time, it was technically, it was Twin Tone Records, but they went by TRG, Twin Tone Record Group, because they had a bunch of subsidiary labels. And so I guess that's like where the Replacements, when they got their deal with Twin Tone, the legend has it, Paul Westerberg walked in with a cassette tape to Peter Jesperson, who now I know and have known for a very long time, but he was one of the founders of Twin Tone, and he was working at the record store. That was his record store. And then they took it to the back room and they were like, oh, wow, this is amazing. You really got something here. And it was just them, like a really sloppy demo tape, super rough around the edges, but it had all the brilliance of the Replacements on it. So they formed that label in that record store.
Unreal. What was your job?
Well, I was an intern doing all kinds of stuff. Like I learned so much. It would be anything from advancing shows for bands on tour to sending out press releases or collecting press, putting press kits together.
That's a proper crash course then for you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they were really cool. The people there were really helpful. Like I said, I still know many of them now, like still keep in touch with them. And they would, explain how things work with distribution and how like the chain works, how the money works, how that breaks down, or how the money doesn't work.
That's invaluable, really, for you.
Yeah, it really was. And things changed so much, obviously, in the music business since then, because people were still, CDs were really popular, and it was important to have like end caps in stores, stuff like that. There was a publicist there who I did a lot of work with, and whatever she had for me to do, it'd be like, today we're doing this, or it was always different. One of the worst jobs ever was like, you'd have to call record stores and check in on their stock to see like what the label's records, what did they have in stock. And they warned me before I had to do that. They said, oh, you're going to hate this job because none of these people are going to want to talk to you. And they were so right. It was the worst job. It was like calling people in their stores, on like a Saturday or something, and they're busy and they don't really want to talk to you. And then, you're asking about this obscure album and they have to go check to see if they have one, and pretty weird, but I learned a lot about the music business there.
We've mentioned like your hometown being a hotbed for bands coming out, but did you get many bands coming through touring?
There always has been that. Now, I honestly didn't go to a ton of shows. I think one of my first shows for sure was Sugar, actually. And it was on the File Under Easy Listening tour. And I know I saw Midnight Oil was another one of my very first shows. Those are real close. That and Steve Miller Band were the first three that I can really remember. But then I got to see Paul McCartney, came to the Twin Cities. That was a long time ago and a really important show for me to see and for everybody, basically. That was about as cool as it gets. But Minnesota in general gets, maybe we don't get as many as like New York, of course, but we're fortunately a stop that most bands see it as worthwhile, I think, because there's just an appreciation for music and the arts in the Twin Cities.
When did you begin to find like a foothold with performing and songwriting? Was that with your band, the Melismatics, or was there a bunch of bands prior to that?
Well, yes and yes. So, because I had all kinds of bands in high school. I had a psychedelic band with a good friend called The Delicious Sideburns. And then we had a band called The More Purpler. And then I had a punk band in high school called Stupid Jerk.
I always love hearing people's band names, especially people who've gone on, like yourself, you got like professional music career. And I always think like you should reissue t-shirts with all these logos on and stuff. It'd be great.
Yeah, it's pretty funny how that works, And then I played in a bunch of bands. I really did. Like Melismatics, I started right out of high school. And I still was in other bands at that time. Actually, around that time, started also playing with Grant Hart from Husker Du for a brief period of time. And then right before he passed away, I started playing with him again on his last record that he made that is not out yet. It was kind of cool, full circle, to get back in his world, because he was a big influence on me in a lot of ways. So the foothold part, I just knew it was what I was going to do. And I had a kind of a blind determination, I was going to do this and nothing was going to stop me, for better or for worse. And I didn't want to be able to fall back on anything. So I didn't want to be like, well, I could try to be a musician, but if that doesn't work, I will become a dentist or something.
No plan B.
I'm like, no plan B. This is what I'm doing, full on. And so, yes, I feel incredibly fortunate that it actually worked, because it doesn't always work. And there's so many ways, it never works the way, or rarely does it ever work the way you think it will work. Something works because there's the things you control and there's the things that you don't control. And it's like, all you can do is try to be really dedicated to what you're doing and passionate about it, sincere about it, do it for the right reasons. And eventually that stuff starts to come into its own, or it has its own currency in some way.
How long did it take for the band to get some traction?
The Melismatics, it took a while. I mean, what happened was like that setting up the band took a while. Like, so it started by, I just had some songs. I had made a couple solo records that no one's ever heard. There's a CD I put out and a cassette I put out in high school. Then I was going into this guy's studio to record, and he ended up being this phenomenal musician and became a very good friend. And he was like, well, hey, why don't we turn this into a band and I'll be in the band. And the band formed out of that. So it started with me going in with songs. Making that first album actually took a few years for various reasons. Some it was because we were busy doing other things. But part of it was just we spent a lot of time making the record. And that record actually started getting traction like very quickly. And the kind of thing that you can't really ever predict or prepare for. It did really well, like on college radio, and it was starting to get a buzz. And I mean, we had stuff like, I remember my parents were getting like phone calls from record labels, and, it'd be like someone from RCA is flying out to see you, or there's and just like all this buzz kind of started going around that first record. We were young and, well, I was dumb, and I made a lot of bad decisions. And like, I think there's some things that kind of derailed the progress that we were making. Again, hindsight's 2020. We didn't really have a guiding light at that time. We had a lot of people getting involved. We had like a big time lawyer coming from New York that was helping us out. But at that time, we didn't have an actual manager. And so I was just kind of like doing it and not knowing what I was doing. So we fumbled around through the next 15 years to varying levels of what was going on, So like the first record kind of started getting momentum. We used that. And then we ended up signing with Ed Ackerson's record label Sustones after that, which was really cool. They had their own struggles too, because like, the music business is very unpredictable and rocky road. Their distribution like went out of business, kept all the product. They had some things that made it a little extra hard. So we made a couple records with them, and that was really fun and cool. Few lineup changes. And then
when did your wife Pony get involved in the band?
Yeah. So her first record was an album called The Acid Test, which was our, let's see if I can do the math here, fourth record, I think. Yeah, fourth record. And that was a really different album and a really different sound, different label. That was like, we started working with John Fields, the producer, who is actually, do you know who he is? Are you familiar with his work at all?
You would not believe how many people I've had on this podcast who have worked and championed John Fields.
John Fields is a brilliant, amazing human being. And meeting him was like a life changer for sure. He saw us at South by Southwest, was like, hey, I would love to produce you guys. And we knew who he was, and we were kind of slack-jawed. I was like, wow, because he was producing he was on top of the world, producing all the biggest stuff. Couldn't believe he was interested and wanted to, or even cared. Kind of funny how that's how I felt. That's how we all felt. But apparently, like, we didn't show it, because he thought after we met with him, he had talked to someone working with us, and they said, yeah, he didn't think you guys were interested or weren't. And I'm like, what?
We're just playing it cool.
We were just trying not to freak out, He was the one that said, so she had just joined the band prior to that album, and she was replacing a guitar player, great dude, Chris Johnson, who he's gone on to do all kinds of other really amazing things. He played guitar, did some background vocals. And then Pony was kind of doing what he did. And then I said, well, there's some keyboards on the records. Maybe you could like fill in some of the keyboard parts too. So that evolved a bit. And then John Fields, when we were in the studio, said, you're underutilizing her. He said, you guys remind me of the band X. Like, you should be both singing. I mean, not that we sounded like the band X, but just the energy of it and what was there as like the assets or whatever. It reminded him of that. So when we made the acid test, that's like one of the reasons the album got that name. Part of it was like a reference to a lyric in one of the songs, but part of it was because it was like a test. We were trying something completely different. So it had been an all, dude guitar rock band. And now suddenly it was like female vocals and we were having maybe more keyboards and a really different sound.
It reminds me, I don't know what's your comparison on this, but it reminds me of the Wannadies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I haven't heard them in a while, but like that's a good comparison, I think. So it was a different record. And that was, like anytime you make a change like that in a band, you're going to make some new fans that like the new direction. You're going to make some people mad, who are like, wow, I'm out now because this isn't what, I signed up for with this band. So that happened. And then I figured at that point, I'm like, well, why should we care? I mean, because you're going to just lose people and you're going to gain people. And then we started to experiment more. I started doing more self-production and engineering. And so when I would demo up a song, I really started putting a lot into the layers and the textures. The stuff that I actually like to listen to usually had more experimental levels of, layering into the recordings. There might be like sonic textures and just things going on where you put on headphones and you could get lost in an album for, you could listen to it over and over and still find new things to get excited about in it. So then I'm like, well, we've obviously abandoned the whole guitar thing, so we're going to embrace this other direction. And, I think the band, like on a whole, we were like, and are like a family. So people, you have arguments, you don't always see eye to eye and stuff, but you come together and you work through it. But I think that probably some of those influences that I really had that I was bringing to the table probably were not shared by everybody. And I mean, you could say the same about from anybody's point of view, but as like the primary songwriter, it's like it starts to have an effect in one way or another. So yeah, I kept evolving. And I don't know, that band was and I shouldn't say was, because it's not like we broke up.
Recently put out a live album, right?
Yeah, we did put out a live record. And before that, there was a compilation of unreleased songs. And then our last record before that, last studio record was quite a while ago, actually. But I don't mean to say it so past tense, but it was a wild ride. And it was, something I'll never regret and never forget because we had so many experiences.
The Melismatics would support Soul Asylum on a few occasions, I believe. And so you were kind of on their radar for some time. Didn't the stage manager from the First Avenue venue say the band had the same vibe as early Soul Asylum?
Yeah. So this legendary dude in Minneapolis, Conrad, he's the stage manager at First Avenue. Really amazing guy. Huge part of our music scene. Everybody knows him. Yeah, he would say that early on. Actually, I remember seeing him. He always reminds me of this. Like when I met him when I was a teenager and I had, like when I was telling you, I did some solo records and I had a tape. So there was a thing where they at First Avenue had the thing where you could bring your tape or your CD and then these judges were going to listen to it. And it was like a booking agent, a record label person. And anyway, I brought my song in and fortunately, I felt so happy that because they're pretty harsh. They were kind of like, yeah, this sucks. This is garbage. And then when they got to that one, they really liked it because they thought it reminded of, they got excited. They're like, this sounds like the Replacements. And then I remember Conrad, that guy was there and he always reminds me of that. And he just looked at me and he just kind of gave me this grin, like right on, the Replacements. But I looked like, I was a teenager, but I probably looked like I was 12. I'm sure I just looked like a total nerd and just out of place and stuff. But he always makes fun of me for that first time we ever met. But he's the guy, yeah, when we started playing as the Melismatics and playing a lot of shows, he used to say, he's like, yeah, you guys remind me of like when Soul Asylum at the same stage you guys were at, like you have that energy and
just that drive and that passion and that excitement on stage.
Yeah. Just kind of like where when you play kind of like, this is the last night we're alive and we're going to leave everything on the stage. You feel like you can't even walk after the show because you just put it all into the show. Yeah, I think that's why it clicked for me with Dave right away. Like when we just played, it felt like I don't know. I mean, I've been listening to Soul Asylum for a long time. I was already a fan of the band. And I just think it's like we had enough of a similar enough vibe that it made sense.
Didn't you just like get some emails saying, can you learn these songs in this amount of time?
Yeah. super cryptic, no explanation of why. You always, when you're in those situations, you can't help but wonder like, well, why? And then you have to wonder, should I do that? I mean, 'cause that's a lot of effort, and you don't even know why am I even doing this? But then I realized, luckily I listened to the part of my brain that made sense. I said, you don't have to know why, but whatever this is this cool opportunity that you're either going to show them that you can do this or you can't. So you won't know. You'll never know, what this could or couldn't be.
Don't have any what ifs.
Yeah, there are no what ifs. Exactly. It's just kind of like, so I just had to take a lot of songs in really fast, and all the years of experience before that, like you said, when you play in all these bands, you do all these things, every little thing that you do adds to your experience and what you can bring to the table, what you can do. So it all comes together for that.
Because they'd had Justin Shabano come in after Dan Murphy left. Had you thought about trying to get on board when it was announced Dan was moving away from the band, or was that just so far removed from anything you could think?
Oh, that's a great question. My answer is that I don't think I even knew, because I don't think that was made very public. I think that was very surprising, because if I remember, the story goes that Justin's first show, I think, was in Spain. It might have been with the Jayhawks or something. And people had signs, "Where is Dan?" But they didn't ever make a public statement. So fans were just writing it out. That's my memory. I could be wrong. So I guess I only heard about it after it happened. I wasn't in their world yet. I mean, obviously not enough where they thought of me then, but then they did later. I noticed we started to have an increased amount of activities together. For example, Michael filled in with the Melismatics. And then Michael was we were doing a show at First Avenue where we were playing replacement songs. And Dave at the time lived in New Orleans, which is very far away. You have to fly in. And I remember Michael calling Dave and saying, "Hey, Dave, do you want to fly out and sing one song with these guys at First Avenue for free?" That sounds insane, right? But he's like, "Yes." And I'm like, wow, okay. So that was the first time I kind of noticed that, well, there's something, you don't just fly to sing one song for free with a band that you don't, why would you do that?
That's pretty cool, though. Probably noticed a few things, put the pieces together later on.
Exactly. And I think for a while they even were, I don't think I'm speaking out of term or making anything up. I think there was a time where it just was kind of well, that's a band, that could be our band kind of thing. Because our bass player filled in for Soul Asylum numerous times. Actually, so did our drummer. Melismatics really a very well-oiled machine, that could play, learn songs fast, arrange songs quickly. And it's hard to find that, it's very hard to find that chemistry of people where they not only can do those things, but also get along. That's really hard.
That's half the battle.
It is, yeah. Keeping it together like that, super hard.
How was your first hometown show with the band? Was that nerve-wracking or exciting?
I'm trying to remember it, so that says something. I think, I know what it was. So it went like this. When I went into audition/rehearse, it was audition, then it was can you come by tomorrow and rehearse? Okay. Can you go to Texas this weekend? And Philadelphia, did that. Then they said, can you go on tour? So it was I think it was the following weekend for the rest of the summer or something. We started off in Canada. This I do for sure remember. And all of our baggage got lost. So we had a show in Canada. We had to fly back to our hometown show, and all of our gear was lost. So none of us, except for, Dave wasn't with us, so he actually probably got some sleep, but the rest of us got zero sleep. It was 2 days. So I was a zombie. So that first show, that's why I was having a hard time remembering it. And then there was a ferocious storm. It was outdoors. It looked like, Armageddon or something. It was crazy. So it was just there was so much adversity in that show that it actually just kind of made you have to rise to the occasion, adrenaline, and so I think it went really well.
You think it went well? It's searching YouTube, see if there's anything on there.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't even know if that's on YouTube. But my memories, it went well. And I think it helped me not have to really think about stuff like that, because there was just so many other big things. I haven't slept in 2 days. We just got our gear back, and, now is this stage going to get blown away by this storm? So fortunately, that allowed me a little bit of freedom that way. So that's how I recall it.
Super, man. And you also have your project Ryan and Pony, which you've released the album Moshi Moshi, but you're also drip feeding some Ryan Smith solo material as well. I love the song Lost Time. I feel like it's a lost track from a John Hughes movie.
Yeah. I can see that. Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. There's the solo record. Yeah. Put 2 singles out so far. I'm Slipping, Lost Time. Then there is an acoustic version of Lost Time out. And then there will be an acoustic version for I'm Slipping coming out on May 6th. And then there's going to be a single of a cover of I Want to Destroy You by the Soft Boys. And then I did a dance remix of I'm Slipping. I'm doing a cassette maxi single, which is so obscure of a reference, but do you know what a cassette maxi single is?
Well, I know what a cassette single is. What's a maxi single?
A maxi single is like, and you can Google this, it's a real thing, I swear to God. So they would do they put out a single, then there usually be several remixes, and there might be the acoustic version, and then maybe a cover. And, so it's like an EP, but it was all based around a single. So I thought, I'm like, cassettes are back. I'm going to drop a cassette maxi single. So I'm pretty excited about that. But there'll be a full-length album that'll come out on vinyl too. But the maxi single is just kind of a thing to do. Like the 2 singles that'll be on the album are on it, and then the other 4 tracks will not be on the full-length album. So it's got like 4 bonus tracks, 2 singles. So that'll be out really soon. The rest of the album is going to be, it's still in the works. So it'll probably be dropping singles until it's all out. So yeah, so stay tuned for that.
Well, Ryan, thanks ever so much for chatting with me. I've loved connecting.
Yeah, it's been really fun. Thanks, Rob.
Never cared what people say, but now I'm striving for okay. I'm left knowing I know nothing, but hey, ain't that something? Yeah, I'm slipping. I keep on creeping.
Thanks so much to Ryan Smith for taking the time to chat with me today on the Straight to Video podcast. Soul Asylum continue to be one of those bands that never fail to brighten my day and really are a go-to band for inspiration, so it's an honor to have him here on my show. For all the up-to-date info, please check out soulasylum.com, Ryan Smith Solo Artist on Facebook, and you can check out all his new solo material along with the Melismatics and his Ryan and Pony project wherever you stream your music. All of it is great, so please dive in. This podcast will soon be hitting 200 episodes, and there's some fun ideas in the works along with probably the biggest straight-to-video project yet, which will be announced very soon. If you're a supporter on the Patreon page, you will get all the latest info on that, so please, if you have time, check out patreon.com/STVpod, where you can sign up for exclusive news, bonus shows, and merchandise you won't find anywhere else, along with the inside scoop on the new project, which is coming soon. That is all for today's show. Thank you for the continued love and support, and it means a bunch that so many of you keep coming back every Tuesday and Friday for a new show. So until we chat again, look after yourselves and speak soon.